Cozy Gloves here. I'm wearing a hat. Today we're going to be looking at compression in a mix. So this is my track, Explore the Universe. And I have this vocal line in here. I've actually got some harmonies as well. We're going to be just looking at the main vocal. And by itself, it sounds like this.
Gravity is chained to your core.
And it sounds, it's pretty nice. And if you want to know how to do the vocal processing and stuff, I cover that in the vocal processing series. Let's go ahead and unmute everything else. And let's hear it in context.
Gravity is chained to your core.
And so that's what it sounds like in context. We'll turn that galaxy off. So we're just going to be looking at this. Now, when I'm compressing something like this, there's a couple things that go through my mind. I know this isn't something that the transients are super mega important on. It's something that I just want to smooth out. I want to take away some of these parts because if I turn off the compression, this is going to sound noticeably softer than this part. And let's just look at the vocal by itself for now because it adjusts, it changes it with the harmony. So it's a little harder to tell because these are subtle changes. You're just trying to get a couple dB out of it in a way that makes it sound smoother and silky and will sit on top of your mix.
Gravity is chained to your core.
So you see this is much softer than the gravity part. So let's go ahead and turn on our compressors and hear the difference.
Gravity is chained to your core.
So it's substantially louder here. Now let's go ahead and do this one by one. So this is before.
Gravity is chained to your core.
And then this is with Maximus.
Gravity is chained to your core.
And this is with the VC2A.
Gravity is chained to your core.
So you see quite a bit more magic happens. It's because I do my gain mostly in the VC2A. So let's go ahead and look at what's going on. So in here, all I have going on is I have the slow, mid, high are off, and I'm just using Maximus just as a single band compressor. And what's happening is I am taking off just this little bit. So it's cool in Maximus. If you want to know more about Maximus, it's covered in the FL12 Effects series. And what's cool about this is you can draw in basically the compression shape, which is really nifty. And I left the attack, sustain, and release pretty much where they were. I was happy with that. Reasonable attack time. And as it comes in, I'm just shaving off just those extra bits that come up into this range.
Gravity.
So see right there, you can see the reduction happening. And I do have some post going on. I do boost it up just a smidge afterwards. So what is that like? That's like 2-3 dB or whatever that is. So anyways, I bring it up just a touch, and that was my move there. Then I did another compressor. You might be saying, why'd you do two compressors? Well, sometimes when I put a lot of load or a lot of work on one compressor, it ends up responding differently, or it's more noticeable because you're using more of that sound of that compressor. In some cases, it literally changes the sound. Like the compressor's been coated, or if it's an analog compressor, it's been made in such a way that it's got like an optimal, like you give it a certain amount of reduction, it does it differently than would if we're doing a lot of reduction. So I toss on this, and sometimes being able to put multiple compressors, you can get away with a bit more. So I use this, and you see I bring the peak reduction. Now this one has a couple controls we haven't seen in other compressors, and at the same time, it's missing a lot of controls you're used to seeing. So for example, peak reduction. Like, what the heck does that mean? It's sort of an all-inclusive knob. I mean, it includes your attack, sustain, and release all in here. Like, it's decided for you. And I'm sure changing where this thing is may change it. I'm not sure if it has some sort of sophisticated detection ability or whatever. Like, I just don't know. It's just the sound. So that was some of the attraction to some pieces of gear, even though they didn't have that many knobs, was really good at compressing. Like, it had a sound to it. So I pulled this one out because I was getting used to using this, and I felt it would be cool to grab it. So this is at 35%. Now we have this detection high pass. Sometimes low frequencies, because they have so much energy in them, they will trigger your compressor. They can sometimes do that, and you might not want that. So you can use the detect high pass, and this will make it so the compressor triggers specifically when higher stuff triggers the compressor, higher frequencies. Now in this case, I didn't care about that because there's not that much low end, and even the lower end of my voice, I want that to trigger the compressor. So that's really good. So that's why I didn't touch that. And then we have a side chain. Side chain, you can have something trigger the compressor, and then the side chain okay, so you have your signal going into the compressor, and then the side chain is a separate signal. And when the compressor sees the side chain signal trigger it, it compresses the other signal. And we'll look at sidechaining later on because that's a little bit weird of a description. But we'll go ahead, move on, and we'll look at that in another video. And then we have our gain. And so I brought up the gain a little bit. So that's why when I turn this on, the gain becomes a little bit more noticeable. And what I'm trying to go for here is I don't want it to color my sound too much. I just want it to be, I want it to obviously be there and sound silky and smooth and on top. But I don't want it to be like outrageously on top. So I'm just taking away just a little bits. I'm not doing anything crazy. There's nothing like extreme. Now that we could get into more extreme stuff when we get into parallel processing, but I try to stay within the realm of something like this. A lot of people will get much crazier with parallel processing. I'm sort of moderate currently in the way I sort of treat that. But with these things off,
Gravity is chained to your core.
versus this.
Gravity is chained to your core.
So it's quite a substantial difference right here. And this has been preserved quite well. Like it still sounds very, very, very similar. So I'm quite happy with the result that I got. It's very transparent in my opinion. Now, some people might say, oh, that's very audible. Different people, you gain an ear for compression as you go. I'm able to pick out really obvious compression, subtler compression. If I'm really paying attention, I can get it. But like, I think that's a pretty transparent move right there. So all I'm saying is people have different tolerances. Obviously, because I have a harmony going on and I'm not doing anything to the harmony. So the full vocal range is in the harmony. That just adds variance naturally to what's already going on. And it's also, I'm not sure if I send the harmony through this bus. Do I send it in there? Yeah, I do. So I send the harmony into this bus anyways. I forgot to check that. So we could have had the harmony on. But anyways, this is with it. So the harmony is going into this bus, and I have it over here, I guess, if I wanted to change it or do whatever. It's got a separate level, as you can see. So it hits the compressors a little more aggressively, and it comes out my vocal bus right here, which is going to a reverb send, and then it's coming out. It's also going out to my master. So let's go ahead and listen to it with the harmony.
Gravity is chained to your core.
And then let's take off the compressors. Now, remember, this was actually softer, like the main vocal line. So this is just something I was mixing. That's what I settled on. It's a little weird thinking about it afterwards.
Gravity is chained to your core.
And now in my vocal processing series, I explain I like the doubling that happens when you do the tuning like that. So it's also doing unison, but as you can see, it starts out in harmony. And this is after again.
Gravity is chained to your core.
So that's pretty cool. One other thing I want to do before we call this good is I want to process some drums with you just to show you some of the potential you have. Now, when it gets to parallel processing, there's all sorts of ideas you could go through, but just understanding the basic settings and just giving an example of them. So I have here a drum loop. Sounds like this. That's really cool. And I picked to use the fruity limiter and I put it on the compressor setting. We actually talk about everything that this does in the FL12 effects series. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to do some general compression. And these are the controls we're given. As you saw earlier, we're given different controls for different compressors, but they stay very consistent across the board most of the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring down the threshold so that our compressor begins to activate. We're going to take note of our compression setting, and we're at a compression setting of 0 milliseconds. So it's going to affect our transients very heavily. And what we need to do, though, is we need to set a ratio at which to compress, because right now it's not got a ratio. So we're going to compress it at a ratio of like 4:1. So this is going to be kind of aggressive for drums. And you see we've effectively removed the transients. Now this can be useful because we may want to come in and we can blend it with, we could make a clone of these drums and make them unique and send them to their own channel and turn them on and put them also up around the same level. And now we can bring up the average level and still have our transients poke through. Versus before. So you see that now this is our compressed version, right? So this is known as parallel processing, but we're not going to be delving into that for now. So I'm going to mute that. And we're going to look back at our fruity limiter. Cool. So that's how you do that. Now, if you wanted to do the opposite, let's say we want our drums to be punchier. We've moved some of the transients. Maybe we've compressed them both slightly. So we're affecting these transients quite dramatically. It's important in drums, because that could really contribute to our groove. We've looked at that in previous videos. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the attack up. We're going to give our attack, let's give it like 15 milliseconds. 15. I said 15, not 50. And we're going to bring our release down. So you're going to see our envelope is going to let the attacks through, and then it's going to, well, you'll see. Here we go. So I'm also going to bring my sustain up just a touch. Cool. Now let's bring our release up just a smidge. We need it a little bit longer. And let's bring our sustain up again. So you notice how much punchier that is? We're just getting those transits to come through. And what we've done is we've let them slip through on the attack phase, but we grab them with our other controls. So our compressor goes, oh, it passed the threshold, and then it grabs it and it turns it down. And as soon as it goes below the threshold, it releases it again. And this is something you're going to have to, use your ear and just sort of find a spot you like. And when it releases it, this is the amount of time it gives it to return back to the original value, its current value. And then the sustain basically smooths these actions out so they don't happen like super fast. The sustain sort of acts as a middle ground for us. You won't always, this is one of the few compressors I've actually seen that has a sustain knob where you can like select it. So like if I turn the sustain way down, you'll see this compression line here. That's what the white line represents. It's gonna be a lot more like, there's gonna be a lot of little lines on it. You see how much like more filled in that is than over here? The sustain just smooths some of this stuff out. And it affects the envelope as well. So it will affect the way our drummer plays. So it's important with drums because it affects the style of the playing. Like if our drummer has a particular style, we want to make compression moves that are going to enhance it, not mess it up. So you see over here, we have all these lines down here, and this is a lot more choppy. Over here, it's a bit more smooth. That's where I brought the sustain up. Now let's go ahead and do some before and after. So we're trying to get at the transients, and if we turn it off, now let's hear what it sounds like with our enhanced transients. And if we want to leave a little bit more room, we could try changing our attack, maybe to something like 20, 24. So that lets some more through. If we want just like the little clicks at the very beginning of the transients, like we can try isolating just these little peaks. You also notice that in this particular example, we get sort of a better space of where things are because of the initial hits. It's a little more apparent in the level differences in your headphones. So this can also be helpful for spatial if you have a recording that's got spatial stuff in it. Now let's go ahead and turn on our parallel bus and unmute that, and let's see what it sounds like. So this was our original, right? So we're gonna mix in our new one. So that's like pretty loud. And here we would go through and we'd set our levels again and reduce both of them. And we can use it to augment the picture of these drums. So anyways, that's just a couple tips about the drum processing. You get crazy, just, do some thinking and pick out some values that sound really nice and do that. And this is all just using the basic compressor settings. You don't need a crazy fancy compressor. You saw that. I even in many cases prefer something that's just got a couple knobs and sets all these other things. I grab Maximus a lot for other reasons. I actually don't grab it too often as a general compressor. Like when I'm coming in here and doing things, I'm often here for a different reason than compression because of its multi-band capabilities and what it does. I may do that. I may use it as a gate or whatever, and we'll talk about that later. But again, this is all covered in the Maximus, all these like crazy controls that are everywhere versus something that's like super straightforward, like the compressor right here. Like you just need a couple knobs to do this. Or if we were to grab like, I don't know, the VC2A, like I just showed you earlier, like there's only a couple knobs. It's not crazy. And they set the knee and the compression. You can't draw in your own curve. Maybe it dynamically shifts around and it's modeled gear. So it's got a little bit of an analog feel to it. All those sorts of things are really cool. So you don't always need like the thing with the bajillion options. That's all I'm saying. If you have any questions, again, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.